If you're dealing with an autoimmune disease, this video might help you because I am going to break down everything I've done for the last 4 years to try and cure mine. Now, I will not be selling anything. I am not telling you to do anything. I am simply sharing everything I've done. What seems to work, what doesn't seem to work, what I think was a waste of money, what I think was worth it in terms of testing, and what I'm doing now. I have been dealing with an autoimmune disease for about 4 years now that affects my joints, mostly my knees and my fingers, and sometimes my wrists and my elbows. This autoimmune disease is basically like rheumatoid arthritis, except I don't have any of the markers for RA. And the only thing that seems to give me short-term relief is oral cortisone. Now in this video, I'm gonna talk about everything I've done over the last 4 years, from the different treatments that were prescribed to me to the process that I went through in order to finding out what finally has been helping me. Now I hope that in this video you might find some answers, maybe you find a path to follow, and if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to ask in the comments. Now again, this is not medical advice, and I am not selling or telling you to do anything. I am just sharing my experience, and maybe one thing out of my experience will resonate with you and could lead you to the path of recovery. So how did it start? About 5 years ago, I started having really bad hives on my hands at night randomly. I went to the doctor and they prescribed me cortisone cream. And they said that whenever it happens, just, apply it on my hands. And the hives would come and go for about a year. In August of 2020, I got dengue in the Caribbean. Dengue is a mosquito virus that you can get. And basically, you're in really bad shape for about 5 days. You have body aches, intense fevers. So I had 5 days of hell, and after that, that was it. In October of 2020, so about 2 months later, I woke up in the middle of the night with agonizing knee pain. Like it felt like someone was stabbing me in the knee. Now I'm gonna stop you right there. At that time, I hadn't had COVID yet, and the vaccine didn't exist. So I hadn't had a vaccine shot yet. On top of my knees being swollen, I started also experiencing pain in my finger, and my index finger was starting to swell. I'm gonna post some photos so you guys can see. Come on. My cat wants to be. I think my cat wants to be in the video, so. No? Yes? All right, you can stay here. So what did I do about it? Well, I went to see my MD, first of all, who ran some tests. And after seeing that they were normal, she sent me to a rheumatologist. And the rheumatologist ran some tests, and then seeing that they were normal, sent me to an allergist. So during the next 6 months, I saw my MD, 2 rheumatologists, 2 allergists, and 2 immunologists. I did 2 rounds of 10 days of antibiotics, a cortisone shot, and a couple of rounds of 20 days of oral cortisone just to help with the symptoms. I also did some allergy testing, which turned out to be negative. Some days the pain was so bad in my knees, the only thing literally that helped me was cortisone, oral cortisone and cortisone shots. So I lived in this constant pain for about 6 months, and then slowly the symptoms started to spread out a little bit more. I would have flare-ups, but instead of having every night, I would have it every 3 days. But seeing that the Western medicine didn't have any answers for me other than symptom management, I decided to go the holistic route. So what is a holistic doctor? Well, holistic doctors are not MDs. They're usually doctors in chiropractic, but they practice a type of medicine that is called holistic medicine, where basically they see your body as a whole. And instead of treating the symptoms, they try to treat the root cause. And for them, a lot of health issues starts in the gut. So this holistic doctor that I saw in June 2021 ran a stool test to see what was going on with my gut. And of course, with all the anti-inflammatories and antibiotics that I took previously, my gut was completely destroyed. And I had candida overgrowth all the way up to my tongue. So he put me on a 3 months candida diet, which if you've never done it, is a really hard diet. You can't have any sugar or carbs, basically. And you also can't have any yeast. I also saw that every time I drank alcohol, my symptoms would get worse. So I decided to eliminate alcohol out of my life as well. Now, this was my first encounter on how a diet could actually help manage symptoms of an autoimmune disease. And also my first time realizing how diet and medicine that you take impacts your gut, and how gut is also linked to overall health. One thing I do want to point out is that my diet, when it all started, was primarily vegetarian. I was even close to being vegan. I was mostly eating vegetables, and very, very rarely was I eating chicken. I also didn't eat beef at the time. So in my mind, I was having what was considered a healthy diet back then. So I start the Candida diet for 3 months. I also start to reincorporate a little bit of meat in my diet. But at the same time, I ended up seeing an infectious disease specialist who told me that dengue, in some rare cases, can lead to long-term arthritis. And sometimes these symptoms can continue up to 2 years. So I do the 3 months of Candida diet and I see that my flare-ups are slowly getting more spread out. My symptoms are overall getting better. And now I have maybe an understanding of what is the root cause of everything, a mosquito bite. And that I tell myself it's just a matter of time and it's gonna go away by itself. I complete the 3 months of Candida diet. My symptoms are now pretty manageable. I'm able to go back to regular life. I still have random inflammation, but it's much better. And I slowly start to get back on a more normal diet. Except I still do not drink alcohol because at that point it had been so long without a drink that I didn't really feel the need to drink. So I was like, I might as well stop at this point. And for the next 10 months after that, life is pretty good. My symptoms go away. Eventually they completely clear out. I'm back on a regular diet, but I am still pretty mindful of my overall carb and sugar intake. I also reduce my processed sugar intake and processed carb. Of course, I'm still having pasta here and there. I'm still having cake here and there. Like, I'm still enjoying life as much as I can, but keeping it within an 80-20 kind of clean diet. And I kept feeling great. In my mind, I beat the dengue, we're all good, and life is back to normal. Fast forward to April 2023, where again, in the middle of the night, I get woken up by the exact same pain in my knees. And I'm like, no, not again. So I go see my MD again. She runs some tests. Everything is normal. And she sends me to a rheumatologist. Now, this rheumatologist was pretty hard to schedule an appointment with. So I had to wait about a month to see him. And in the meantime, I'm stuck by myself with no answers. And the only thing that's helping me is cortisone. So I take oral cortisone to be able to live. But the problem is you can't keep taking cortisone for a long period of time because it's really just not good for you. So this is where I decided to take matter into my own hands and start doing active research. And this is where I came across fasting. Now I know that there are a lot of people that don't agree with fasting, but I'm just gonna talk about it because this was the first clue that it was diet related. My father is an orthopedic surgeon and I told him that I didn't know what else to do, but I read that fasting could help. And his answer was, oh, that's a good idea. Fasting is known to be the #1 healer. So I stopped taking cortisone and I immediately embarked in a 3-day water-only fast, where actually I did water and coffee. Surprisingly enough, during the fast was my first time that I had the pain, but that it was manageable without any medication. And then I broke my fast at the end of day 3 and I went to sleep, and the morning of day 4, I woke up and for the first time, 0 inflammation. Everything went away. And then I started to eat again throughout the next few days and the inflammation started creeping back again slowly. But I thought, that's interesting. When I didn't eat, I wasn't in pain. Now that I eat, I am in pain. No food, no inflammation. Food, inflammation. Now it's finally time for me to see the rheumatologist, and I go in his office and I tell him, I'm like, hey doc, I did a 3-day water fast and I thought it was interesting that all my inflammation went away. And this was his answer. No food for 3 days? That doesn't sound healthy. And then he went on and prescribed me methotrexate, which is basically an immunosuppressant. It's a small dose of chemo. In the Western medicine, they think that an autoimmune is basically your immune system attacking itself. So what they do is they prescribe you an immunosuppressant drug like methotrexate, which will lower your immune system and therefore stop the reaction. And my own father called it poison. So I decided to pass on it. And at that time, I had this feeling like, man, I'm onto something with this fasting. Like, it's not normal that I saw such relief from not eating. So from June 2023 to January 2023, I kept living in pain with really bad flare-ups, inflammation, 3 days with no inflammation, random days with full week of inflammation, can't walk, can't do a fist, my hands are completely swollen, and I take random cures of anti-inflammatories. I'm also doing a whole food diet. The one I'm told is healthy and supposed to help, so lots of veggies, low meat, quinoa, good nuts, all that stuff. The diet that you are basically told is non-inflammatory. And to be honest, it's not going well at all. I tend to have really bad flare-ups at night after dinner. Here's a picture. And I'm in so much pain throughout these months. During that time, I also start to read a lot of books on autoimmune diseases, and I also start to listen to a bunch of podcasts. And this is where I started hearing about mold sickness. Now, apparently there's this thing called CIRS, C-I-R-S, which stands for Chronic Inflammatory Response Syndrome, that apparently can cause unknown random inflammation in your body. So I decided to do a mold urine test, and these were my results. So before you rush into doing a mold urine test, there's a few things you need to know. First, that test was $400, which is pretty expensive. The second thing, which is the major issue with a urine mold test, is that if your test is negative, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not exposed to mold. A negative test can mean that there is no mold in your environment and that you're fine, but it could also mean that you have mold in your body, but your body is not able to get rid of it through urine. Now, if your test is positive, it does mean that you have possible mold in your body, but it's also a sign that your body is good at getting rid of it. After seeing that I had some mold, I researched where this type of mold can come from, and it turns out it's mostly from food such as wheat and nuts, which I ate a lot. So I decided to find a clean source of nuts and see if it helped. It didn't. During that time, I also got my place tested for mold. I did an ERMI test, which is about $500-600. And then I also did invasive testing behind my walls, which is about $700 to $800. And the inspector looked at the result and said that they're not conclusive with a CIRS reaction. The new year start, we're now January in 2024, and I decide to go on a paleo diet, which is known to be a diet to help a lot with autoimmune. And on this diet, you can eat meat, fish, fruits, vegetables, and tubers. So sweet potatoes and like nuts. The reason I did that is because it removes all processed carbs and processed sugars. So basically you're eating only natural, untransformed foods. And still, without having any answers, I decide to go see a new holistic doctor. And this is the part that might save you some money. Pick your holistic practitioner well. It will save you a lot of money. So I went to see a new one, and the consultation fee was $500, which is a lot of money. So I wanted to make sure to make the most out of this consultation. I sent him a document with everything I went through up until then, every experience I had, all the tests that I'd done. And I show up the day of the consultation, he had read nothing. So I had to spend my whole consultation explaining everything that I'd previously written. He suggested I do a comprehensive food sensitivity test, which is about $1,200. And this time a blood mold test, which is about $500. And his consultation fee was $500 as well. That day itself, I spent $2,200 for a consultation and 2 tests, but I was so desperate to find some relief that I did it. Now, what is a food sensitivity test? It's a test that measures a certain immunoglobulin G, also called IgG, in relation to certain foods. Now, holistic doctors believe that if you have high IgG in response to a food, that means your immune system is reacting to that food. And it could be a reason for inflammation. The problem with that is that the American Association of Asthma and Allergy says the complete opposite. They say that IgG testing shows tolerance for a food, not sensitivity. So you have two very, very opposite train of thoughts on IgG testing. But because Western medicine wasn't able to help me, I decided to give it a try. And this is some of the results. So these are all the foods that I was told to basically avoid for 3 to 6 months. I didn't eat these foods for about 3 months. And to be quite honest, on the first 2 weeks of this elimination diet, I actually saw a little bit of improvement. But then I never really got better. It's like I went from here to here, and that was it. And I was still having really, really bad intense flare-up, just a little bit more spread apart. But again, the fact that removing food made me feel better confirmed that my arthritis could be food-related. The mold blood test that I did also came back, and it came back positive for a type of mold called Claspoidium. The holistic doctor prescribed me antifungal medication for a month, which apparently is really, really taxing on your liver. Also, I didn't see a single change in symptoms during that treatment, so I probably wouldn't recommend that. So I started having issues with this doctor. So within a month and a half of this elimination diet, I decided to go see a different doctor who was recommended to me by a few people. And that dude was actually amazing. What I liked about that guy is that before prescribing anything, he did a GI map test, which is a test that takes a deep dive into your microbiome and your overall gut health. The reason why he did this test is because he believes that a lot of autoimmune diseases and just health issues in general comes from the gut. And also, I was starting to be really bloated, like 3 months pregnant bloated. This test costs about $450. I was lucky that my insurance covered half, so it cost me $218. But this is definitely a test that if you have any type of discomfort, bloating, or anything going on, you should definitely take this test. And so these were my results. Turned out I had H. pylori, gut dysbiosis, and also intestinal permeability. And this is the protocol that he decided to give me. So first for H. pylori, he told me to get on an H. pylori diet, which is basically a diet where you remove chocolate and salt. It's very random, but that's the diet. He told me to take this supplement, which is called HPLR, which is supposed to help with this bacteria and your overall intestinal health. I also had to do oregano oil every day, which is a natural antimicrobial to kill bad bacteria. And the thought process for him was that the presence of bad bacteria like H. pylori in your gut just makes your gut unhealthy overall and could make your immune system react. Then we treated the dysbiosis. Now, if you don't know, dysbiosis is similar to SIBO, which is basically when you have overgrowth of opportunistic or bad bacteria in your gut. The bacteria in your gut feed off fiber, which is mostly veggies. And the more fiber you eat, the more you feed them. But if you have an imbalance in your gut with bad bacteria, you are also feeding the bad bacteria. You feed a lot of veggies. And then you're feeding into the imbalance more and more, until the bad bacteria eventually overpowers the good one. And some of the bad bacteria I've had have been apparently linked to autoimmune diseases. So to get rid of these bad bacteria, he put me on what's called a low FODMAP diet, which is a diet where you remove most of the veggies and you end up starving those bacteria. The low FODMAP made sense to me because remember when I said that when I fasted, I felt better? Well, when you're fasting, you're not feeding the gut bacteria. So they actually are dying, which resulted in me feeling better. So now I actually had a reason for my fasting benefit. Fasting helped kill some of the bad bacteria I had in my gut. And now I had to keep doing that by hopping on a low FODMAP diet. And then we finally had to treat intestinal permeability, which is also known as leaky gut, which according to Dr. Lustig, 93% of Americans have. In simple terms, they say that leaky gut is when your gut barrier becomes porous and therefore you have toxins that you're ingested that now are able to go through it and that supposedly infiltrates your bloodstream and then your immune system reacts to it. So to treat that, I had to stop eating foods that damaged my stomach lining and also that were hard to digest. I also had to take this supplement called RepairVite SE, which is supposed to rebuild the mucosal layer of your gut. So for the next 2 months, I did this protocol, low fiber intake, gut repair, and H. pylori treatment. And for the first time in a year, I finally started seeing some relief. I was still having flare-ups, but not as frequent, and my everyday inflammation was a little bit lower. I also heard that parasites could be a source of immune reaction. So although my test from the GI map said I didn't have any parasite, I still hopped on a 1-month Parasite Cleanse, and I used the Parasite Cleanse from Rogers Hood Apothecary. I didn't really see any major change from the Parasite Cleanse, so I'm not sure if it was worth it for me. I did have on the second week intense flu-like symptoms, which they said could be a sign of detox, but I didn't see any weird thing come out, so I'm not sure if it was worth for me doing. The Parasite Cleanse was $100, so at that point I figured it's not really a big deal to spend that much. But I do have to say it is very, very, very time consuming. You have to take 3 doses per day and it always has to be on an empty stomach. So during that time, my diet was mostly meat and only the veggies that were allowed on the low FODMAP diet and certain tubers like sweet potatoes and tiger nut, as well as certain fruits. And after a few weeks, like I said, my symptoms are better, my flare-ups are more spread apart, but I still experience symptoms. And then at that moment, I went to New York for 4 days because we were out and about all the time, I ended up eating out. And without realizing, I didn't eat a single vegetable during the 3 days. My diet consisted of mostly meat, fruit, sourdough, and mostly eggs. And I noticed that my inflammation was going down while I was in New York. And then I came back to LA and on my first day, and I had a little bit of kale and a little bit of broccoli. And that same night, boom, my inflammation started right back up. I had a huge flare up. I did the same thing the next day, and again, another huge flare up. So I thought, damn, that's interesting. And this is when I decided to remove all the veggies off my diet. I figured the best way to have a low FODMAP diet is to have no FODMAP. So we are now in May of 2024, and I restrict my diet even more to only eating meat, fruits, eggs, tubers, so sweet potatoes, and sourdough. And the reason why I kept sourdough is one, because I'm French, so I didn't want to give up on bread. And the second thing is I read a book on lectins from Dr. Gondry, and he says that artisanally made sourdough, which is fermented throughout usually 24 to 36 hours, removes most of the lectin and the gluten content of a sourdough, which makes it easy to digest and usually pretty okay for anybody who might be gluten sensitive. So at this point, I'm seeing more improvements on my daily symptoms. They're not as strong, but I still have random, really bad flare-ups. So I start to wonder, like, what could possibly cause it? And this is where I came across the animal-based diet, which is a diet that is supposed to mimic how our ancestors ate. So it's meat, fruit, honey, and raw dairy. Although we are told that dairy is bad and that it damages your gut lining and it's just not good for your health, people practicing the animal-based diet believe that raw dairy is actually very good for you. It contains a lot of enzymes and it makes it very easy for humans to digest. They also drink a lot of kefir, which is fermented milk, which is packed with probiotics, which is great for gut health. So I tell myself, all right, I'll do this diet, but I still want to keep my sweet potatoes because I read that they're a good source of carbs. I stay on this diet for a month and a half. I see most of my bloating finally going away, which was a good sign for me. And that was the moment for me to take another GI map test to see how my gut was doing. So as a reminder, I did a month and a half of low FODMAP, and then a month of modified animal-based diet, which included sweet potatoes, and these are the results. So as you can see, everything is cleared up. All the bad bacteria that I have overgrown are now dead. But I still have a little bit of H. pylori, so I have to continue this diet of low salt and keep taking that HPLR supplement. And although I'm feeling better, my bloating is gone, I still get those random flare-ups. And I'm just so confused because I'm like, my diet is so restricted. What could it be? And this is where I listened to this video on the animal-based diet, and this is where they start to mention oxalates. Oxalates is a toxin that's found in plants. And Sally K. Norton is a specialist on it. She actually wrote a book called Toxic Superfoods, which I'm actually in the middle of reading right now. Oxalate is basically a toxin that plants use as a defense mechanism. And she believes that long-term exposure to oxalates leads to chronic illness, which is another reason why people on an animal-based diet or a carnivore diet tend to heal. It's because they don't eat any oxalate, as they don't eat any vegetables. I also found that there's an arthritis called oxalate arthropathy, which is the result of long-term oxalate poisoning. And guess what is high in oxalates? Sweet potatoes, which I was having every day and was a staple in my diet for a while. So in May of 2023, when my symptoms started again, I realized that I was having a lot of veggies at the time. I was having meat, but I was eating a lot of veggies daily, like 3 times a day, which was also the case when I was mostly vegetarian in 2020 and had my first flare-up ever. And the fact that in the last 3 months, I went on a low FODMAP diet and then also went on removing all veggies, and surprisingly, my symptoms got better, I started to believe the oxalate theory because a lot of the veggies I used to consume were high in oxalates. So it's only been a week now that I removed sweet potatoes, and I haven't had a single flare-up in that week. So I am now on a fully animal-based diet, which I will do a video about, but I'm hoping that this actually clears out my arthritis. If you are dealing with some type of chronic health, I am not suggesting that you hop on a carnivore diet or an animal-based diet. But I do hope that this video that I just made explaining everything I went through and everything I've tried helps you to potentially pursue some type of testing or to figure out what works for you. For the first time in 4 years, I think I have possibly found what caused all my issues, and I am very hopeful that I will finally make full recovery. Like I said, it's only been a week that I've been on a fully animal-based diet with close to no oxalates, and I can move my hands, which I haven't been able to make a full fist in a year. So I hope this video helps you. I also hope that it helps saving you money into the possible testing that you're thinking of doing. If you have any questions, I'm happy to make a video on it. Again, this is not medical advice. It is just me sharing my experience in hope that it helps someone.